Alright, welcome back guys. Today we're doing something a little different. I'm going to compare two amps that I get asked about all the time. And one of them is the Friedman JJ Jr, that beautiful red and white amp right behind me. And the one right underneath it, the Friedman JJ Jr. So we're going to take a look at both of those in just a sec. Before we do, please check down in the description box, and I've got a free gift for you. It's called 5 blistering licks in the style of Van Halen, Randy Rhoads, George Lynch, etc. To light up your fretboard. And these are cool. There's tab, there's Guitar Pro, there's video. It's all free. Make sure and check that out in the description below. Yeah, so we're gonna take a look and compare the lead channel or the dirty channel on both of these. These are the way that I use them most on those channels, and I think that's what most people want to hear. Now, I'll say this as a caveat: the JEL has a great plexi channel, which is the clean basically on this amp. And the JJ has also a very nice clean channel, totally different style. Now I've covered the JEL 20 in more detail, and I'll put a link to that video so you can check that out, where I cover the plexi channel and all that. But here we're just doing kind of a shootout, kind of a comparison of just the dirty channel on both of these amps, hopefully to give you a pretty clear picture of what they sound like and how they compare to each other, because I think they're very different amps, and we'll get into that a little bit as we go along here. I'm not going to be too long-winded though. I just want to do some simple playing, some chords, maybe a couple lead licks and things like that, and change pickups, all that, just basic stuff you can hear. I'm not trying to impress you with my chops or anything like that on this video. There's other places for that sort of thing, but right now I just want to demonstrate the sounds of the amp. Most people just want to hear, what does an open G chord sound like on this thing, right? So let me explain my setup before we get started. Here is starting with the guitar. This is a custom Chub Tone guitar. These are made out in Huntington Beach, California. It's a great company. I'll put a link to that too, because some of you guys might be interested. The builder there is used to formerly work at Charvel, and so you get a very awesome, if you like Charvel guitars, it's a beautiful Charvel style neck and body, and they do custom paint and all kinds of stuff, and all kinds of body shapes and neck shapes as well. So, but the pickups are a DiMarzio This is a tone zone in the bridge, and then in the next an Air Norton. So, you know, they're moderately hot pickups, but certainly not blazing hot, like say an X2 Win or anything like that. So I have the settings on both amps fairly similar in terms of EQ, where I've got the mid and treble at about 5, and then the bass is a little higher, maybe 6 or 7. On there, and the presence is maybe about 10 o'clock or so on the presence on both of these. And then what I'm doing is I'm coming out of the amp, and from the back it's going into a 2-notes torpedo Captor X, and then from there it's feeding a Celestion Greenback speaker. It's just a stock speaker IR from Celestion. It's called the All Room 25 watt Greenback. So that's what I'm using. I like it because it's not too bright. It's really smooth, and I'm going to use that for both amps. That way that'll be a kind of a more even comparison. All right, so with all that said, let's get started. I'm just going to play a little bit here on the front end. The JEL is what we're going to start with, the JEL 20. Obviously, this is the Jake E. Lee amp. Awesome little insignia there. Very cool. This amp likes to be hit hard. It's not as compressed as the Double J Jr. That's one thing right off the bat you'll notice. So if I hit this hard, it really blooms. Gain right now is at about 3 o'clock, and I don't have saturation switch on, and I have not pulled out the gain knob. We'll do that. I'm also going to be using a Buxom Boost, Friedman Buxom Boost with this, but that's not on right now. I'll let you know when it is. Okay, I am hitting pretty hard there. If I go a little lighter with the touch, to me it doesn't sound as good as when you hit this hard. Now this makes sense to me. My theory anyways, why this is the case on this amp is because, number one, it's not overly compressed, so it's very dynamic. And number two, Jake E. Lee helped in the design of this amp, obviously, to his specs. And Jake hits hard. Admittedly, he plays hard. He really gets physical with it. And so it makes sense that he would want an amp where you really have to kind of dig into it to get all the good stuff out of. It still sounds okay with a light touch, but so there's not a ton of gain, so you'll notice that it's It's got a nice chug, but it's not overly gainy there. And it's a little bit flubby. So on this channel, it's designed like a JCM 800, I believe is kind of what it's modeled after. And traditionally, JCM 800s love to be pushed with a pedal to sort of tighten up the low end. And I think that is probably the way I would use it in most scenarios, and that's the way I have used it. I've used both of these amps on a couple of different albums I've done, and and I've been playing them and using them on YouTube for years, at least a couple years each on this. I can't remember when the JEL came out, but I got it almost right away, and I've been using it a lot ever since. But before that, the Double J I'd been using also in my YouTube videos, and almost always I use it with a Buxom Boost, or sometimes I'll use a Wampler Tumnus. Ironically, on this one, to me it doesn't sound as good with like a traditional Tube Screamer or a Boss SD1 or something like that. Something happens that just kind of thins it out too much for me. But with the Buxom Boost, it doesn't do much coloring, and it adds a lot of it tightens up the bottom end, which is the main thing for me, and it does add a bit of gain too. The Buxom Boost is great because it does have a tight switch, so you can do various amounts of tightening on there, and also you can boost the gain. So let's do this. Let's go. Here's the sound again, just with the gain on about 3 o'clock. Perfectly usable hard rock sound. You could use that, and get through a gig very easily. It's a nice dynamic sound. If I use the volume knob, excuse my scratchy volume pot. Fighting off a little bit of a cold here, guys, so bear with me when I take a little sip of coffee here, which is probably not the greatest thing to drink when you're sick, but I'm a coffee junkie. What can I say? Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play kind of just chug style here without the Buxom Boost on. Then I'm going to kick it on for you. With it on. So to me, that's got more of like an 80s rock, 80s metal type of sound to it. You get a little bit more gain in there, and it tightens up the bottom end. It'll sound good with, like I said, it will sound okay to me with like an SC1 or Tube Screamer. But to me, it almost gets too much mids going on, which I like mids, but almost too much with this amp, in my opinion. So I like kind of the neutral sound on this. So, all right. So lead guitar wise, so if I play with the Buxom Boost on, turn it off. On. you know, the notes start to die out on you a little bit without that extra bump of gain. At least with this guitar. Now, if you have a super hot pickup in there, you might not have any issues at all, and it might sustain forever. But for me, I would mostly use it, especially when I'm playing like 80s rock and metal, with the Buxom Boost on. Always, I just have it on. But for that more classic rock vibe, you know, you could use this sound with the gain about 3 o'clock or so, and then kick on the Buxom Boost for your leads, and you have everything covered there. Also, just by the way, I'm not using any effects. That should be pretty obvious. It's dry as a bone. No reverb, no delays. The effects loops are great on these, by the way. I'm just going to play the amp raw. And no effects on the in Pro Tools either. So I'm not using any post EQ or anything like that. Yeah, okay, so that's kind of with and without the Buxom Boost. Now let's mess around with the gain real quick. So if I turn the gain down to mid, if you hit it hard, it'll still spank. But if you don't, it's just kind of a nice, mellow, semi-rock sound. If I hit the Buxom Boost with that, not bad, not bad. If you go any lower than that, let's say you went down to 9 o'clock on the gain, it starts to clean up. Then you lose some of the power. So, I mean, I don't know why you would do that with this particular amp. I like it around, 3 o'clock, maybe 2 o'clock, if I'm not wanting as much gain. But let's keep it at 3 o'clock. Okay, that's back to without any Buxom Boost. Now, a couple other things this amp will do is, if you put it in the saturation mode, then it gets compressed a bit and the gain comes up. When you do that, you got to raise up the volume on the amp because it just squashes it a little bit. So let's try that. So here's with the saturation on, and I will try to compensate volume wise. Okay, saturation's on, no pedals. It's pretty nice, right? Yeah, that's really great, especially like for a lead sound, because one thing you may notice as you're on the saturated setting is the amp's not quite as dynamic, so you don't get those. You don't have as much range there for your louds aren't as loud, and your quiet is just quiet. So I like a really dynamic amp, and I like to use the volume knob. But if you're just looking for one good sound, or you're just looking to maybe like record a guitar solo, this is a good one. So just for comparison, here's with the saturation. Without it. notice it kind of gets a little flubbier. Not as much gain there, but it's more open and dynamic. So there's trade-offs. Now the other thing we should talk about is the gain knob that pulls out. So we haven't done that. So let's do that. Pull this out, and we'll leave the gain at 3 o'clock. We might need to bring that down though. Now I really like this. One thing that I notice is it does get a little thinner. But if you do a lot of recording like I do, that can be a good thing because it really cuts through in a mix that way. You don't want a lot of, extra low frequencies and stuff like that when you're recording with the guitar. If I keep it at keep the gain switch out, but max gain here. One thing I like about it is it never gets too gainy. It's still, you still retain a lot of the clean chords and stuff like that, where you can hear all the notes in the chords. All right, so hopefully that gives you a pretty clear idea of what the JEL 20 can do on channel 2. We covered the basic overdriven sound with the gain at around 3 o'clock and messed around with that a little bit. We added Buxom Boost to it. We also tried the saturation mode, and we did the gain pull knob and messed around with that. And hopefully, you got a good idea of how that sounds. Let's compare it now to the Double J Jr. So now on to the Double J Jr. Now this one on the distorted channel, or the gain channel, is patterned after the BE 100. So it has the BE sound. If you've played any iterations of the BE 100, or let's say the IRX, you have a taste of what the BE sound is. It's slightly compressed and it's very smooth distortion. Right now I have the gain on at 3 o'clock and no pedals on. So here we go. So for me, this is tighter already than the JEL. Right now it's not as flubby, and it's a little bit more gain at the same basic setting. this one I will at times use without the Buxom Boost, because I think it sounds really good and not really flubby at all without it. But most times I will add that in. Let's play around with the gain knob though before we turn on any pedals. So if we kick this all the way up to, well, actually I had it just below 3 o'clock. So here's 3 o'clock. Once again, just like the JEL, it's beautiful because all the chords ring out. You can hear the notes, even with a fairly large amount of gain there, right? To me, that's a great sound for hard rock and metal, and it cleans up great. So even though it's, you know, a little more compressed than the JEL is, it's still pretty dynamic. You can get a lot of sounds out of it just using your volume knob. So I love that about this amp. Okay, let's go with the gain all the way on 10 on this one. Nothing wrong with that. Now I've heard Dave say before that when you go to 10 on these, it's not as tight as it would be as if you were at, like, say 3 o'clock. But you're adding a little bit more gain in there. It's a little looser. I think that's true. It's a little bit looser maybe. It could just be that at 3 o'clock there's not as much gain to deal with, so it sounds tighter. I don't know. But I think just on its own, at full gain here, that's still not that's still not like some amps where it just gets crazy and you're swimming in distortion. This is still very usable. All right, let's take the gain down to half. So we're at max. Here's half. Here's where you get a nice rock and roll sound, you know. chugging type stuff or heavy rhythms, you're going to need more gain than that. So now if I go from half back up to 3 o'clock, you can hear chug factor. Alright, so that kind of covers you from mid all the way to full gain and in between on this one. I love it. Fun to play. It's easy to play this amp, I think. And all of those sounds I could use at any time for recording or to get through a gig or anything like that. But if we take the gain down, let's say to 2 o'clock, and we kick on the Buxom Boost. See those harmonics start popping out a little bit more. To me, that's a great hard rock metal sound there. Again, the settings on the Buxom Boost are pretty mild. Just the tight switch is at 11 o'clock, between 10 and 11, and the boost is at about 10 o'clock. So just a little bit of hair, a little tightness. This is a good one for chugging though. That's significantly tighter, I think. Here it is with the boost off. Also great for lead stuff. So let me try it like on the front pickup. Nice and dynamic, and it's plenty loud there. And then on the front, on the bridge pickup, and if I play around the volume knob, you know, it's still very dynamic. So I love it with the this is how I mainly use it, with the Buxom Boost, and sometimes without the Buxom Boost, with the gain on at about 3 o'clock. If I'm using the Buxom, I'll back off the gain to about 2 o'clock, maybe 1 o'clock, depending on how I have the Buxom Boost set. And that's it. Very simple how I use this, and I love it. It's a great amp. Now, the other thing on here is it does have a saturation switch, just like the JEL. It does not have the pull switch for the gain. So the only thing we haven't covered is the saturation, so let's do that. Again, you have to bump up the volume. So here's what happens. The volume comes down, got to turn it up to match it. So now the gain's still at 2 o'clock, but you can hear it's more gain now. I do notice and can feel it's not as much dynamic range there, which makes sense. It's more compressed. So buttons can be very usable if you like more of a compressed sound, and or if you're doing, like I said before on the JEL, if you like more of a compressed tone and you're doing like a guitar solo, sometimes that works out really good. It really kind of depends on what kind of player you are and what you're trying to accomplish. For somebody like me, I like an amp that's pretty open and dynamic, and that it responds to how hard you hit it, and still has clarity in the chords and all that. So both of these amps will do that. Less so, I think, with the saturation mode. You kind of compromise some of that, but still a great sound. So once again, if I kick it off and turn the volume down, now we're back to where we were. A little loud there, but hopefully you can hear it's more open now. Alright, there you go, guys. Nice comparison between the two amps on the Dirty channel only. Now, the question is, which one would I recommend, or which one would I choose, right? I really want to cop out and just say get both, because for me having both is a blessing, because I can cover so much territory with both, because they have different sounds. The Double J Jr has that BE sound, which is very smooth distortion. The JEL is more biting. It's more in your face. So to have both, to do different guitar tracks and things like that, or to choose one or the other depending on what kind of music I'm playing, is the best of both worlds. It covers a ton of territory. So the cop-out answer is definitely get both. I don't plan on getting rid of these anytime soon. I love these amps. However, if I had to pick one, I would probably stick with the JEL 20, just because it does it can do a little bit more of a variety of things, and plus you have that cool plexi channel. But man, I'd be sorely missing the Double J if I did ever get rid of it. So I won't, and I would highly recommend either amp, and if you can afford it, get both and you won't regret it. All right, there you go. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Which one sounded better to you? Granted, this wasn't through a live cabinet or anything like that, so take that into account. But I have played these live before, and with 412 cab and a 112 cab, and it does have a very similar sound to what you're getting here. So it's not a night and day difference through real cab. So yeah, let me know comments. Which one do you prefer? Do you like the JEL 20 in that awesome red color, or do you like the more understated Double J Jr, the Jerry Cantrell amp that's kind of dark and foreboding? Let me know. All right, I'll see you next time. Rock on.